On this week's Hockey Inside Out, would you trust Marc Bergevin to rebuild the Canadiens if you were Jeff Molson? I think we all know the answer to that question. Welcome to this week's show. I am Adam Susser, and joining me today is Stu Cowan, CBC Daybreak's Jessica Rusnak. And joining us, once again, it's been a while since you've last been on the show, joining me for the first time. He was drafted first overall by the Washington Capitals in 1976. He joined the Montreal Canadiens in 1982, a year before I was born. How does that make you feel?
Oh, don't mention those numbers.
We'll discuss that more in detail later. Former NHL defenseman, Mr. Rick Green. Thanks for joining us today, Rick.
Pleasure.
Okay. Here are this week's talking points. Number 1, is there anyone on the Canadiens who should be untouchable at the trade deadline? Number 2, what are your takeaways from Tuesday night's win against the Avalanche? Number 3, what's your biggest concern about the Canadiens' defense core? Number 4, seeing as they probably won't make the playoffs this year, which prospects should the Habs look at calling up for the remainder of the season? And number 5, should Jeff Molson allow GM Marc Bergevin to be in charge of a rebuild if the team decides to take that route? Let's start the show. When I wrote this week's monologue before Tuesday night's win over the Avalanche, there was only a 1.3% chance of the Habs making the playoffs this year. But coming into work today, I was pleasantly surprised when my colleagues told me that the Habs more than doubled their chances of making the playoffs with last night's win over the Colorado Avalanche. That's right, they're now at a 3% chance. I like them odds, guys. You like them?
You're saying there's a chance.
Exactly. You're saying there's a chance. So assuming the Habs are not able to maintain that momentum from the Colorado game, they will be enthusiastic sellers at the trade deadline or before the trade deadline on February 26th. So if that is the case, is there anyone on the Canadiens who you think should be untouchable at the trade deadline, or is no one safe?
Well, it's a young man's game today in the NHL, and I think you need to protect your young, good players like your Victor Metes. Alex Galchenyuk, as much as he's been through here, he can score. Lots of talk about trading Max Pacioretty, but on a team that can't score goals, to me it doesn't make a lot of sense to trade the guy who's your most consistent goal scorer. So are there untouchables? Yeah, I think so, but I think also Marc Bergevin needs to listen to any offers that come his way too, but I wouldn't trade away young talent.
I would say that Brendan Gallagher, to me, is not a guy that you trade away. He's been playing really well on the ice, but he's also that spark plug that you could kind of put him with anyone and he's able to get their game going. I feel like he's one of the true leaders on this team, so he's not a guy to give away. But as Stu mentioned, that Max Pacioretty's name has been the one that's been rumored the most, but you trade him away and then you have this big hole to fill. But I think if you can get something back from him, he's someone that you would definitely let go, but keep the younger movement, because that's really where everything is going. And Max Pacioretty is going to be 30 next November. Yes, it's not super old, but if you can get some younger prospects for him, that might help down the road.
Yep.
I agree with you, Jessica, on the Gallagher side. The guy is the heart and soul right now of the Canadiens, and he's just shown it each and every night. So you really have to keep a guy like that. But on the other side, I think there's a lot of guys, you mentioned Pacioretty. In order for you to get something back, you have to give something. And I think that the way things have gone for this year, I think that they need to change some of the chemistry. I think they need to change some of their personnel. And in order to do that, you're going to have to give up some players that you were hoping to do better this year, haven't done it, so maybe they're attractive somewhere else.
If you can get that number one center for Pacioretty, possibly, and then you move Drouin over and have Galchenyuk on the other wing, I think that might be a possibility. You mentioned Gallagher. Does he remind you of anybody you played with?
Kind of like a Mike Keane, if you will, just kind of a gritty guy that comes to play every night, and you know what you're going to get out of him. And, he's not very big, and yet he's getting into the traffic area. He's hacking and chopping, and he's knocked down. He gets back up.
And he always had that smile on his face.
And he's just like, go ahead, punch me. I'm going to get back up, and I'm going to come back at you. And you know what? There's no stopping him. So he's just a great guy to have on your side, and a pain to play against.
I would think so, exactly.
So even if they did trade away Pacioretty, do you not think that them trading away their most consistent goal scorer, even for a center, would put them in more or less the same situation?
Well, it's one step forward, one step back kind of thing. They brought in Jonathan Drouin and they lost Alexander Radulov. And I keep wondering how good would Jonathan Drouin be if they'd kept Alexander Radulov. I don't think, when he signed Drouin, I don't know if the plan was to lose Radulov or what it was at that point. But yeah, it's you're losing your most consistent goal scorer. wherever Max Pacioretty goes, if he is traded, if he plays with a legitimate number one center, he's going to score 35 goals minimum. What he's done here without having a real number one center, playing with Philip Danault, playing with David Desharnais, no knock on those guys, but they're not legitimate number one centers in the NHL. He can score, and there's not a lot of guys in the NHL who are natural goal scorers.
And less pressure as well, because he's always talked about dealing with the pressure and the mental side of the game that has sometimes hurt Max Pacioretty's ability to score goals.
Okay, so in other words, it would be a great move for Pacioretty if the Canadiens traded him
Well,
away.
if Pacioretty was to go to a non-hockey market, like let's say like Radulov went to Dallas, and he wasn't the captain, and he wasn't mobbed by the media every day, and they just said, Max, go out and score 30 goals. I think life would be a lot easier for Max Pacioretty. But having said that, he loves playing in Montreal, and he makes it very clear he doesn't want to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know him that well, but my impression from the personality that I see in him is he's finding it a real burden being the captain and struggling with what's going on individually and as a team. And I think we all know that he's got the talent to score goals, but the bottom line is it's not happening. And sometimes you have to make changes and move forward. And the time of waiting for the future is now, and I think that it's really important to find a way to get some type of player that's going to give you impact now. Easier said than done, but the time is now as your key guys are starting to get a little bit older. Price is getting a little bit older. Weber's getting a little bit older. You got guys that have a limited number of years left, so you have to maximize the situation by trying to find a way to surround those guys with some good players and changing the chemistry.
Pacioretty told me he's hearing the trade rumors, and it sort of showed in his game against Colorado. He had more hits than he had shots. He had 5 hits, which isn't what you'd expect to see from Max Pacioretty.
So the Canadiens ended the Avalanche's 10-game win streak on Tuesday night, one of the hottest teams in the NHL. I guess it's the little victories that we have to appreciate as Habs fans. What are some of your takeaways from that game?
I think that everyone just seemed to play well, that it was an exciting game to watch as well. And prior to the game, I was talking to some people in media, and I said, we haven't had a really good game to watch probably since the earlier January when they played Tampa Bay. And then yesterday was one of those games that you were interested in, and when everyone's able to elevate their game, they're able to be a good team. Now they just have to find a way to do it consistently. Jonathan Drouin probably played his best game of his time with the Canadiens. I know you asked him after the game, and he said that he's not sure that's his best game, that he felt like maybe he's had better ones since, but I think he was just being a little bit modest there.
It could be.
And I think that, on the game sheet, your best players have to be your best players, and they have to deliver every night if you're going to have any success. And those guys did it. Drouin did it. Had a great game, but overall, just looking at the performance, I thought as a group, everybody had an excellent game as far as their aggressiveness and their ability to use their speed and take away the speed of Colorado to the point where they got a little bit frustrated. And that's a good team, Colorado. I was quite impressed with them, but I was really impressed with the overall play of everybody on the Canadiens, which they have to look at as a bonus moving forward here to see if they can find a way to get that type of game and that type of execution from each and every guy if they want to scratch themselves back into
3%
playoff spot.
Well, I'd say Colorado had won 10 games in a row coming in. They also played the night before in Toronto, so they were probably a little bit tired. But you got to jump on a team like that, and that's what the Canadiens did. And the thing I found interesting was Nicolas Deslauriers. Who would have thought it would be Nicolas Deslauriers to light a spark with Jonathan Drouin and Alex Galchenyuk, but since he's come into the lineup, he's been a breath of fresh air. He finishes his hits. He's leading the NHL in average hits per game with 4.3. He's got 7 goals in 28 games. He's just been, in what has been a lousy season for the Canadiens and their fans, he's been such a pleasant surprise.
It's like he's a guy, he's just happy to be there, and he knows, when would he ever thought that he'd be playing on a line with Jonathan Drouin and Alex Galchenyuk, so why not make the best of it?
And I think it's obvious you know what you're going to get from him, because every game that he plays, he's involved, he's finishing his check, he's going to the net, he's creating opportunities. And there's a guy that understands what work is. There's a guy that understands how to play within his limitations. So I give that guy full marks, and I love to have him on my team.
And this is a guy who was a defenseman right up until he got drafted in the NHL. And you can tell he's not used to scoring goals by his goal celebration the other night when he fell on his butt going into the corner.
His team goes the other direction.
But there's an another example of how intelligent defensemen are, because they can make that transition from defense to offense without even, missing a beat. So, what can I say?
So, Rick, I'll start by asking you this question because you played as a defenseman in the NHL for 15 seasons. What are your biggest concerns with the defense core on the Habs this year?
I notice their lack of aggressiveness, stick-on-stick work, meaning I never like to see the opposition having the opportunity to go from the top of the circle and let a shot go to create either a goal or a scoring chance. The defense, I feel, rather than getting caught in between, have to aggressively attack the shooter in a way that they're going to force the shooter to make either a bad pass or they're going to either deflect the puck up and out of play. And I find that they haven't been consistently good at that. And I think that's an area that I'm quite sure Claude has touched on, and it's an area that they have to get better at consistently if they're going to try and eliminate scoring chances against and shut down some of the bigger offensive-minded teams. So that area, along with their ability to battle guys in front of the net, there's no way in the world that the opposition, other than it does happen, should get second whacks at a rebound. The rebound has to be the responsibility of the defense. If Price can see the puck, or whoever's in the net, if he can see the puck, he'll stop it, but there's no way opposition should get to rebound. So there's a price to be paid for that, meaning positionally be close, be aggressive on loose pucks to make sure you're the one that's getting the loose puck and you're not watching the opposition guys stand there and say, okay, I have time and I have the space and I'm going to do what I want with it. So those two areas are a concern for me, and they always have been, and hopefully they'll figure out that is going to be critical in their play to shut down a lot of the teams.
Okay.
They need to play a little bit more like Rick Green.
Well, it's I think everybody kind of knew where I would be, and similar to. And I always talk about Shea Weber. There's a classic example of a guy that is always in the right position at the right time, and he forces all the other forwards that have to go through him to get to the net. And I think if you position yourself like that, and hopefully some of the guys can feed off of that, you're always going to be in the right position, and you're always going to be the one to eliminate scoring chances and shut down the offense on the other side.
Okay. So, given the improbable chance that there is of the Habs realistically making the playoffs this year, what prospects do you think they should take a look at calling up for the remainder of the season?
Oh, there's not a lot.
I think they've already done it.
Yeah,
Well,
they're all here.
Scherbak is one, and the only other one really is Noah Juulsen, who broke his foot the first preseason game of the year, former first-round pick, and obviously a setback to him. But apart from that, there's slim pickings on the farm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that Nikita Scherbak hasn't got another call-up, because when he was called up, that's when he did get injured and then went back down and was rehabbing with the Laval Rocket and playing there. That, he's another first-round pick. Let's see what they're able to do. And at this point of the season, what harm can that really do this team? And if it could maybe it'll have the same sort of effect as when Nicolas Deslauriers is called up and you see a guy who's really trying to earn his spot and making other people competitive because they're worried about losing their spot. So Scherbak would be one, and like Noah Juulsen as well. It'd be interesting to see what he can do at the NHL level.
Well, I went to see one of the games in Laval, and I did see Scherbak, and to talk about Scherbak and Deslauriers in the same vein, I think is pushing a little bit personally, because Deslauriers, hungry, wants it, and is really, really motivated to be part of the Montreal Canadiens. Scherbak, on the other side, I'm not sure that he has that same drive. Skills, but at least without judging too quickly on a first impression, I was like going, big, he's got skill, but you got to use it.
Do some of these first rounders sometimes have like this entitlement that they feel like because they're a first round pick and they know the organization is maybe giving them more opportunities than others?
Well, maybe, but then it comes a point in time where if you're given opportunity, how much more can you give them? And they have to understand that they have to perform now. The expectations are there to do something now, and that's that's the name of the game. You can't wait and let the opportunity go by. I mean, he's got to grab a hold of his chance, and he's got to show what he can show. And if not, you got to make a decision on some of these guys. And I think that goes with a lot of their players through the organization. In coaching some of them, you can bring them so far. But then you have to make a decision on, okay, how much farther can he go, or is he not going to get much better? And sometimes you need a little luck on your side to have that happen, because some are late bloomers. But on the other side, you have to say, you know what, I don't think this guy's going to be that good. I don't think we can get him to that level. So you have to make change. And
I was in St. John's a couple of seasons ago, and the feeling about Scherbak then was that his work ethic, both on and off the ice, left something to be desired. And a case of sometimes I think with these first round picks, it's been easy for them their whole life. They've been the best player on their hockey team since they were 5 years old. They just went on the ice and they were the best. Then you get to the AHL level, and I think some of the junior kids don't realize it's professional hockey. You're playing against men who are fighting to put food on the table for their kids, who are fighting for the contract. You're not playing kids in junior anymore. And I think that might be where Scherbak thought he'd get to the AHL and it would be easy. It's 2 years later. You hope he's learned that it's not easy now and he'll move forward, but I think that was the problem with him going.
And I don't disagree with it. Some mature quicker than others. Mm-hmm. Some are able to make that adjustment earlier than others, and you have to be careful that you don't pass judgment too quickly. Mm-hmm. But you'd like to see, the bottom line is you got to see effort and desperation and trying to make the difference and try to get better as a player, and contribute the best that you can contribute given your chance.
So fans have been calling for his head all season. If the Canadiens decide to do a rebuild, should Jeff Molson let Marc Bergevin be the man to do that?
I think that might happen, but I think if Jeff Molson's going to let Marc Bergevin have another 5-year plan, he has to have somebody in between him and Bergevin. I think he needs to hire, if not a president of hockey operations, a consultant. Hire somebody just as a consultant and sit down with Bergevin and say, okay, what's your plan? What are we doing now moving forward? And this, I think, has to be done before the trade deadline comes. What are your plans moving forward? And if he passes that test and Molson decides to let him stay, but I mean, as I say, it's 6 years into a 5-year plan, and they're as bad as they were when he first got here. So I think you need to start looking towards someone else. But again, the candidates are limited because of the language issue. It has to be somebody who's bilingual, so you got to look who else is out there also. But I think they need somebody else that Bergevin, or whoever the next GM is, reports to between Molson and him.
Well, I think it's obvious that what's going on is it's not working. Mm-hmm. So somebody has to be held accountable for it. And in that line of work, you've got a lot of people that are under you that are supposed to be, whether it's finding players, developing players, finding a way to get the best player that is available. Is it happening? Probably not consistently enough. And this is a problem area that they're having, first of all, in the development of some of the young guys. Some of the selections, as we know, haven't been the best, and they're paying for it. And other teams are finding ways to get quality kids with good upside, and they're playing in the NHL. And I don't think we're seeing enough of that as an organization in Montreal, that you get excited about some potential that's going to be part of your NHL hockey club.
Okay. One of the names you hear also is Julien Brisebois as a possible replacement, the assistant in Tampa, obviously francophone, bilingual. My concern with, and I keep hearing his name, is another guy who has no experience as a general manager. He's been an assistant, same as Bergevin had no experience as a general manager when he came here, and that concerns me. That's why I'm saying if you do replace him, who's out there to take his spot? There's not a lot of candidates available.
And I think Jeff Molson's not ready to break up with Marc Bergevin. I don't necessarily think he's lost all the faith in him. So I don't know. I would not be surprised if he's going to be the guy trying to put this retool in motion.
What do you think, Stu? You think he's going to fire him, or is he sticking around?
50-50. I really don't know. I mean, the fact that if we go through the trade deadline and he lets him do the trades before, then I guess he's going to stay. It would make sense that you're going to keep him.
My feeling is, give him to the trading deadline, see if he can find a way to change what he has with his group, and if not, where do you go from there? It's Jeff has some serious questions to
like
talk about.
We could end on where do you go from there? Thank you all for watching. That's our show today. Let us know if you'd give Marc Bergevin the responsibility of rebuilding the team if you were president. That's right, I'm pretty much inviting you all to complain openly about Marc Bergevin in our comment section. I'm Adam Susser, and I'll see you next Thursday.